Hello, lovely stockists. Hello, I'm Annie Sloan. If you haven't met me before and I haven't met you, hello and welcome. I'm going to be teaching you how to do a workshop. Doing workshops is incredibly important. While I do this, I'm going to be telling you lots of things as well. But the most important thing I'm doing is teaching you how to teach this workshop. How to use the paint. Now this is one pot of paint with many, many uses, and I think that's really important that you should make that clear. It's not a one-trick pony. This does lots and lots of different things. So we're going to teach this, okay? So this is the introduction to the Annie Sloan method. It's got everything there that anybody who's never used the paint needs to know. They need to know that it does a wash. They need to know that it does, it's a sort of two-colour distress look, and we've got other samples of all of these things to show you. They need to know that it does this beautiful texture. They need to know how it all changes with the waxes. They need to know how to do an ultra smooth finish, beautiful, beautiful smooth finish, and they need to know how to do little bits and pieces with the gilding wax. Then you'll notice here I've got this little sgraffito thing, which I think is really important. It's the way of getting people to feel a little freer with paint. So that's it. So I'm doing it on a board. It's a wooden board. It's actually, I think they're floorboards, which have been split in half. They're new wood, so it's not exactly like most of the things that people will use. Mostly people are going to be using old wood. So this doesn't have quite the texture. It's very, very smooth. But of course, sometimes they'll also be painting IKEA pieces. So this is all absolutely fine. We don't worry about things like the knots. You can explain to them, of course, in real life, you'd put knotting solution on it. But don't worry about that. So here we are. So this is what you need to do a workshop. So you need the 4 waxes. That's the clear, the white, the brown, the black. You need a load of brushes. You must never run out of brushes, but you need both the bristle brush, the flat brush, and a big flat brush as well, possibly. You need some waxing brushes. I would always have some detail brushes. It shows people what we are and who we are. You need Louis Blue, you need Giverny, you need Florence, and you need Aubusson, and you need mixing sticks. You need some gilding waxes, you need some sanding pads, you need some cloth, you need a mix mat, and you need a plastic bowl. So for here, I'm using litres. You might like to use litres because it's very, very good marketing. You need to have it out there. You need for people to see it. So don't decant into other containers and have them out and about, except for workshops where you can just put them into the small containers. You need to keep them in the big tins because that is what sells us and what makes it everybody know us. The great picture. That's me, a drawing I did many, many years ago. It was me with my painting hands declaring myself as a painter. So that's what all that is about. I did that actually in 1976, something like that, a long time ago. And so that tin needs to be shown. Very, very important. So we're actually going to start with this one because this one is the texture. And it's the heavy texture because it's a little thicker. It needs to take longer to dry. So we start with that one, go on to that one, go to that one, and then finish with that one. So first thing, we need to introduce people to brushes. So this textured one, we're going to use this brush. And you know that we have 3 different sizes of brush. We've got the small one, which I'm going to use now because it's a small area, but do show them the other ones. So this is our bristle brush. It's made of hog hair. It's a natural brush. It's not cut in that beautiful shape that you have. It's actually put in by hand, so it has this lovely sort of rounded look to it. It means that the paint goes on very smoothly. They're very full, so the paint can be applied very easily. You'll see that I hold my brush like this. Some people hold it like that, which means that they do that. Or they hold it a bit like a pen, and then they paint a bit like they're writing, and they tend to do banana shapes, which isn't so nice. if you hold it like that and don't use your brush that way, but use it from your arm, you'll find that you then are slightly more mechanical way, not exactly, but it stops you doing those horrible banana shapes. So, yeah, hold it like that. It's doing that and like that. So your fingers are on there and that's like that. Okay? So I'm going to use Giverny. I'm using this because it's a good strong colour and it shows everything up. It looks vital and great. You should have other things in the room so that they're a little paler, different sort of looks, because this technique looks completely different depending what colour it's painted with. So to begin with, I'm going to divide this by eye. So this is leaving a space at the end, leaving a space there, which is going to be the very smooth look, and this bit here. So it's roughly in, I'm not sure what it is, halves maybe. So now I'm going to apply, you don't need an awful lot of paint on there. I'm going to do that. Just cover that. Just get it covered in no particular way and not terribly thickly. So that's just roughly done and textured as well. Now you're all going to do that. While you do that, this is now beginning to dry. Not completely. I don't want it to be completely dry. So I think the mistake that people will make at this point is using too much paint, because this is really quite dry. I mean, it's not thick, it's still wet, but it's not covered with paint. You know that this paint covers extremely well. So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the things that you should talk to your customers about. You should say, like I said at the beginning, that this is a paint that does everything. It goes from thick to thin to washes and all those lovely things. We should also tell them at this point, this is the paint that goes on metal, it goes on ceramics, it goes on fabrics, concrete, plastics, certain plastics. The cheaper plastics not so good because they're too oily, but the more expensive plastics are really good. Marble, yeah, everything. Leather. At this point, we're talking very positively. So as soon as I say leather, I know there are some issues with leather, which I will talk about later. But for now, we're very, very positive. We say this does everything. We want to excite people about it. So don't start talking about, well, leather's all right, but, you know, nothing of that. Just let's talk about it. Let's be very, very positive. Because at this point, everyone's going, oh, this is great. Oh, I could paint this, I could paint that. Oh, that's fantastic. So now this has now got to a point where it's a little bit, it started to dry. So I'm going to now put a second coat on, and this is where I need my glasses. So I'm going to put that on, and I'm picking up a little bit of the colour underneath. So don't get this too thick. And I'm not putting on loads and loads of it, but I'm covering and getting some lovely texture. On this bit here, where I started, it's a little bit too wet. So, and it's sort of thick. So I might just take some of that off. So I'm brushing the wrong way to take that away. That's given me a texture, but it's not very beautiful. So now I'm going to put this back on, leave that to dry a bit. We're actually starting with quite a difficult texture, or technique rather. But it gets people involved and it's interesting. So there we are. Now what's nice there, you see that bit there where you've got the darker bit that's dried and the wetter bit over it. That will create a sort of relief. So it's going to look like that if you looked from the side that way. So you've got dips and high points and lower points. So yeah, that's it. And if you were doing a real piece of furniture, you would do that all over in sections. So that's it. Let's have a look and see what Amy's done. So this is, Amy's done it beautifully wrong for me. So she's done it very thickly, and that's what happens. Sometimes people make it far too thick, and you've got long brush marks. Now, you might have noticed that when I'm doing it, I'm more very lightly going over it. And I turn the brush as well because it gets sodden on one side, and then you turn it over. So actually, lots of different directions. You don't want to see brush marks at this point, not really. It's more a lovely texture. And yeah, so that's what I would do. And just all she needed to do was leave it a little bit and not put it on quite so thickly. Yeah, people think, oh, it's thick. Well, it is thick, but it's more layered thick, and the paint needs to be a little bit dry. Thank you, Amy, for doing it so beautifully wrong. So that one, you can also go back if you think, oh, I don't think that's quite enough. You can always go back onto it. When I do pieces of furniture, I often will go back and back and back to it. So, yeah. So while you're doing that, I'll also show you some samples of some other colours you might like to do in your workshop. That is the Antibes Green. That might also be a good choice. The Antibes Green and the Emperor's Silk. So there's two ones. So they look good. They both show up the white well as well. So you're going to be showing the after it's finished, you're going to put some white wax on, some black wax and some brown wax. And they work really well for that. So this radiogram is something I did. It's in one of my books. It's in And Sloan Paints Everything. So this is actually an old radiogram. For those who don't know what that is, what it is actually, that's how you played music, really. So it's a large piece of furniture which is now no longer needed. It's in my studio, so when I teach in my studio, I always show that to people because it's a really good example of what it would look like, a pale piece, because a lot of people will be doing pale pieces. You should have something like the whites obviously are really important, but you could also have duck egg blue or some of the more known paler colours. But why we've got the stronger colours is because you need to show people how exciting and gorgeous it is. So this piece has been done with lots of texture, and I put brown wax on it, and then afterwards I actually did a wash of white paint over some of it to soften it back. So it's in this book, and there it is there. So you could show that to people that's in the book. Now there's another piece in here which is also a good one to show, which is this piece. That's Barcelona orange. And I've done black wax there, but Barcelona orange with black wax. And that's really, really gorgeous, I think. It's one of my favourite pieces. I think it's really important to have bits of furniture in your shop so that people can not only look at it, but they can also touch it. So these are just cheap bits of plastics and china that we've painted, so people can really see what it looks like, see the light and the dark. We've also got these here, which if you can get something similar, these came from IKEA. And that's where these come from, so people can see, oh, that's the black wax, oh, fantastic. We also have these, which are from magazines, so people can see, that was in that magazine, oh, that's cool. So they're impressed by who we are and what we do. So anything you can keep in here is a really good idea. So that's our display way of showing them. Yeah, people need to touch things. People need to look at it. You won't sell Barcelona orange, or any colour actually, unless they can see it. So if you've got a shop full of white things, guess what colour you're going to sell? White. Grey, yeah, you'll sell plenty of whites and greys if that's all you're doing. You must have some other things. So I'm going to do a talk about colour and how that all works and how I think you should do things in your shops. And that's another video. So meantime, next technique. We've got to leave that to dry now. So if you're making notes and your customers are making notes in their books, I would suggest that you let them leave that to dry now and leave a gap in their notes. Don't give your customers notes on how to do this workshop. That just allows them to go, oh great, I'm going to go and teach it somewhere else. You can't stop them teaching, but don't help them. That's all I would say. So just give them some a notepad and paper and let them make notes. But of course you could always tell people, buy the books. That's the best notepad ever. So the next technique we're going to do is this. This is my signature technique. I don't know if that's true, but I'm happy for it. It's one colour over another. I've chosen here to take a colour which is a sort of teal colour. That's because we don't actually have a teal. And teal is one of those colours that everybody has their own interpretation. One sees it's very blue, some sees it very turquoisey. So we're going to leave it up to you to show people how to mix it. So it's one colour underneath another colour, which is often paler but doesn't have to be. They can be very similar. I've got some samples to show you, and you should have samples too, especially of pieces which are carved and have got some texture on them. So put that aside, and I'm going to bring out my bowl. Here we are. So this is an important thing to have. A good plastic bowl is what you need so that people can see how to mix a colour. When people come into your shop, they will say, oh, I want you to mix this colour for me. I want that colour, or I want that colour, and you may not have it. We've got what might be considered a limited palette, but in fact, it's limitless. We can make any colour we like. Most of our colours do not contain black. Obviously, graphite does. But it means that you can make any colour you like. So, how to make a colour? Because people go, I couldn't do that. That'd be really scary. It's not. So this is a bowl to show them. Now let's say they want to mix a teal. So I'm going to use this combination. There's lots of other ways to do it. This is Florence, that's Aubusson. You could use your finger, I usually do, but perhaps on this occasion I won't. I've got my mix mat out. This is a great opportunity to explain what a mix mat is. These are the best thing ever. I normally paint directly on my tables. My tables are getting thicker and thicker and they're covered in paint, which is all very lovely, but it's not so much for a customer. I mean, I have a studio, so it's different. But a customer, you end up painting on plates and stuff. It's not so good. So these, you can paint on them, wipe them off, wash them, start again, do all sorts of things with them. You can use them for stenciling, you can do them for everything. They're really, really great. So I'm going to do a blob of 2 of Florence, and then I'm going to take a blob or 2 of Aubusson. And then I'm going to mix the two together, knowing that I'm using the brush that had the Florence in it. So it's mainly, I'm trying to do half and half. So you mix the two together and you decide, is that what you like? Is that what you want? And you might go, yes, that is perfect. Or you might go, I wanted to have a little bit more. So now you'd say I've got 50-50 of the two colours with just a little bit added of the Florence. So I've just made a slightly lighter colour. It's lighter because this colour is dark and doesn't have any white in it, whereas that has a little bit of white in it. So now you know the sort of ratio. So now I'm going to put that, I can put it on there. And you could have a spoon, or for this purposes, I'm just going to use this. So the main colour is the Aubusson. So I'll do 1, 2 blobs of that. We don't have to measure stuff. You can, some people get really worried about it. 1, 2. I'll get this brush, and now I'm going to mix the two together. I might have got slightly more of the Aubusson, I think. I'm not sure. Now, you see, at first when you mix them, the two mix fairly well together, but you've got to keep on mixing. So if you've got a large amount of it, if you were mixing like a litre of it or a quart of it, you'd make certain that you really mix well. You don't want a sudden bit where it suddenly flares into another colour. Actually, I wouldn't mind because I love that sort of thing happening, but not everybody does. So if you want that little bit of flair to happen every now and again, then don't mix too well. But if you don't want that, you need to mix well. So that is your ready mixed colour. You then test it with that. Oh, actually, it isn't quite the same as that. If I want that, I've got to add a little bit more Florence, which is what I thought. So I thought I'd added slightly more of the other. So it had been 50-50 plus a little bit more Florence. So I mix that, again mixing really, really well. And then I test it. And then you go, yes, that's great, or not, whatever. It's like, I would say that it's a little bit like making pancake mixture. You make the mixture and then you realise, oh, actually I need a bit more milk. And that's how you do it. You don't make it, you make it probably often slightly thicker than you want it to be, so that you can always add a little bit more. So now the next question is, yes, but I've only mixed a certain amount there. What happens if I run out? Well, the way to work that out is you need a wall in your room where you're teaching your workshop to say that is 13 square metres or whatever it is where you are. So you need to know the coverage and you need a wall that covers. Then you have to say, so that is what a litre of paint will cover. Then you need to have a piece of furniture in front of that, and you have to say that piece of furniture, if you did one coat, just the front, would cover that wall, I don't know, twice. Just look at it visually to go, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do you need a half a litre to make, or do you need a litre? That very visual way of doing it, I think, makes people understand exactly how to do it. Because I don't think if people talk about 13 square metres or 14 square metres, it doesn't usually mean that much to people. So something very visual in the room is the best thing. So it's very, very important to have in your shops an area, a paint bar. My shop is tiny, but I do have a small table, and on it I have all the sample pots, the little project pots. I have a mix mat, I have brushes, and so everyone can have a go. Sometimes the customer doesn't want to do it themselves, but you can do it for them to show how colours mix. And you can have there too, samples like these things. Or mixing sticks with colours on them. You just need a whole area to do colour, because we are the colour experts. That's the main thing. So it needs to be an area that people can play and have a go with. So not only do you need lots of samples of furniture, you also need your colour, little colour table. Right. I have said here that we're using these two colours to make teal. Another colour that we don't have is coral, and there are lots of different corals. So I would have a choice on your workshops between making a teal or a coral. The coral we suggest you do with English yellow and Scandinavian pink. They don't have loads of other colours. I think the principle is what you're trying to teach here. You're not telling them this is not a colour workshop. If they want to come and do a colour workshop, that's another thing altogether. So now I'm going to use this and I'm going to paint. So we go back to the board so you understand where we are on here. So it's here. So I'm going to use a strip at the end where it's going to be a wash. But on here, I'm going to do this bit. Now, I could use this brush because I was using it, but actually you'd probably use one of these. Not absolutely necessary. So I'm just going to put that. Again, not too much paint. I think if you're used to painting, what happens is that painting furniture, you want to do a large area. So you dip the paint, go. And actually we're not, we're doing a small area. So get that on all over. a little bit of texture. Now, this time, if you can, find a little tiny bit of crud. Now, the crud is there not to make it a really textured thing. It's to sort of partly imitate the look of something carved or something very old. If you're looking at painting old pieces of furniture, you'll find that it's got lumps and grooves and dips and all sorts of things. Well, this doesn't, because it's completely flat. So what I'm trying to do is imitate that look of old painted furniture, which does have little nicks in it and all sorts of odd things. And I want that to be quite natural looking. So what I usually say with these boards, there might be a piece of wood or even a little bit of sawdust. So I don't cover it. I'm not after covering it at all. I just want a few bits. So actually that's just 2 or 3 bits there, and they'll stick on the paint. You could sort of rub them in. That's covered now, but you could just do that. They'll be fine. They'll just sit there and give you a little bit of texture. Because this technique is all about carvings and that sort of thing. So now that needs to dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to show you some carved bits and pieces. So here we have, this is the textured look. So this started as, I don't know what it was, the side of a bed or something, I'm not sure. I've just bought it as it was, just to demonstrate stuff. So this is a rather beautiful carved thing here. I started by painting it olive, that's the olive, and then over it I've put duck egg blue. I love these two colours together because they're so subtle and I think very beautiful. They are tonally almost the same. If you don't understand what the tone thing is that if you half close your eyes or make this black and white, that is lighter than that. So the darker colour, the olive, is a deeper colour, and that's a lighter colour. Really, tone is just darker and lighter. Don't worry about, well, we're forgetting about colour, we're just talking about the tone, if it's darker or lighter. So they're quite close in tone, these two colours, but they are very different hue. The colour is very different. One is a green and one is a blue, although that is quite a greeny blue. So this works very well. It's quite subtle, but it's beautiful. So I've done that first, and then over it I've done the duck egg blue. Then I've waxed it, and then I've sanded it. Now in some places it's gone right back to the wood, and other places you can see the olive underneath. And I think that's really, well, I love this. I've covered it very strongly there. You could do just a light sort of wash over it. It depends on the piece. So that's one combination of colours. This is a very different sort of thing. That's very traditional looking, so it looks like it could be a real French piece. Whereas this here is, the colours are really modern. I mean, it could actually, there used to be, you'd find Irish pieces like this, quite strong colours, and they would have painted it and then it decided, I don't like that colour, we're doing it again. People painted and changed their minds. So that is a really lovely combo, I think. This is Givany underneath, and then over it I've done Aubusson. Then I've waxed it and rubbed it back and sanded it back. So that's the same colour, they're both the same colour, both blue, but one is a lot lighter than the other, the tone is different. So this is another one where the tone's very similar, but the colours are very different indeed. So there I've got Henrietta underneath, and then over it I've done French linen, and just to keep it a little bit lighter, I've mixed in some white, but I did it unevenly, so you get little sort of, just little streaks almost of white, just to give a little variation, and then waxed it and sanded it back. And you'll see sometimes you can see the wood, and others you can see the pink. All of that depends on the sanding pad you use. So when this is dry and we do a second coat of colour, you will see how I use the sanding pads. So all of those techniques are a 2-colour distress. And we've done the first coat here, second coat coming up. So this, as I say, is a paint that does many, many things. You will notice that it's very thick. That doesn't mean, and I have been using it more or less straight from the tin, doesn't mean you always have to add water, but sometimes you do. It covers incredibly well. And you can add water later, you can do all sorts of things. It's one pot of paint that does lots and lots of wonderful magic. So now I'm going to, while this is drying, I'm going to do the flat finish. So I'm going to use this, I've left myself a very small area to do it in. I'm going to use this one here. So this is my Aubusson. It's pretty good, although it's been open already for a day, I think. Well, not open, but the lid was off and I've using it. It is very, very thick, unlike that one, which has only just been opened. The longer they're opened, the more thick they become. This one, oh, it's slowly going, look. So I can cover that really well. No water added at this point. Need my glasses. But you might need it. Not too much paint, it goes a long way, and spread it out. Get rid of your excess paint. You don't want too much on there. That's the trouble when you paint large amounts, you find yourself putting too much on a small area. I'm painting that, I'm spreading it. Now you notice I'm doing something which is called feathering. I've got my brush at that angle. My paint brush is pretty dry. Look, I've done that. There's not much on there. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm spreading it out. Because I haven't got distance, I haven't got a long way to go, I'm just going to get rid of that by doing that. So feathering and feathering. Now you might find at this point you want to leave that to dry and put a second coat on, because we're going to do part of it, we're going to do a very fine finish. Or you might find you might want to do a little bit of water on there, just a tiny little bit of water mixed into the paint. This is now dryish, so a thinned amount. And that will go, I mean, it's really smooth. So my lovely assistant, Amy, has done it. And of course, as usual, she just can't get it. This is what customers do. They put on far too much paint and then wonder, one, why it isn't drying quickly and why they've got brush marks. They put far too much. And the other thing is they might overbrush as well, so they go on and on and on brushing, and all they'll do is just lift the paint. So yeah, there's just a load of paint on there. So that's the usual thing. And then they do, and then of course they'll do that, and they'll go, but there are brush marks on there. So not only does it got to be thinner, it's also, and drier, it's also got to be at that angle. So you're feathering it. At the moment, actually, I couldn't feather it even if I did that because it's so thick. Thank you, Amy. I just wanted to show you the things that people normally do. And I do find when I say to customers that I'm teaching, could you feather it like that? They'll still hold the brush like that. So you've got to be very careful that they are doing that. Because for some people, you don't know. The thing about teaching workshops is you're teaching people at various levels. So some people are actually quite adept at holding a brush and painting, and they're used to it all. And others really, you know, they're practically holding the brush like a knife and fork. I mean, they really don't have much idea. So, you know, and we don't want to make fun of them. I mean, I would be the same doing most sports. So it's just helping people at whatever level they're at. And I have great respect for my customers, and I'm sure you will as well. So if some are brilliant and some aren't. Having said that, there are some people I think, I don't think you're ever going to get this, but they're very few and far between. Most people get it. So this should be pretty much, I mean, this is almost dry now. This is quite a warm day here in Oxford, but it's more or less dry, but it's not dry enough. So I've done 2 coats on there. Going to let that dry now. And now I'm going to go on to this one here. So the final one here is the wash. The washes are so simple, so easy. I've done lots of bits of furniture with washers on them. I've done them on pine, on oak, on all sorts of pieces of wood. Raw wood, it will just be divine, be marvellous. But if you're going to do it onto something which maybe it's got old waxes on it and things, test it out first and see how it goes. You'll be surprised how well it goes. I'm always constantly amazed that I can do it on things which are actually quite varnished. Not really, really shiny, but things which have got that old, perhaps it's a sort of an old shellac finish, I'm not sure. So there are several ways to do it. If I was going to do a floor, I would probably make quite a large amount of paint, which I've watered down, and then I'd put it on with a big sponge. I'm going to do Louis Blue on here. So there's my Louis Blue. I'm going to add a bit of water to it. So you would mix up an amount in a container. And you would test it. So here I might just paint it on like that with a brush if it was possible. There shouldn't be brush marks on it, and that should dry, and you should test it out by putting wax or varnish on it. When you do that, you'll find that you will lose some of the colour. So make this slightly more opaque than you think. Test it always, because you do not know what it's going to be like on that piece of furniture. Or sometimes I will make a mix like slightly diluted, put it on and take a cloth and wipe it off. Why I'm not going to be definitive on this is because, as you know, if you're a furniture painter already, that different woods do different things. So you've got to be prepared to sort of duck and dive a bit with it. So that might be really perfect. Or you might have a little bit more. Now, we also know that because this wood is yellow, or wood could be pinker, it will change according to, the colours will all change according to the colours underneath. So just be prepared to play about with it a little. That's looking quite nice. Actually, I might just there have a little mix. There we are. So there we are. So that's how that's looking there. That, of course, will dry very, very quickly. If it's for a floor, I would then lacquer it. I wouldn't wax it, although some people do like a wax finish. I would certainly, myself, I would lacquer it. Or you could wax it on a piece of furniture, which would look very beautiful and mellow. So why would you do a wash on some wood? It might be because you want that rustic look, which is really lovely, or it might be you've got really nice wood underneath. I would not do it on a sort of like, I don't know, a burr walnut or something. It just doesn't seem to work. I think it's so fussy that it just doesn't. Well, I've done it once and that did look nice. You never know. But generally, I do it on pine. That's old pine looks fantastic. There are some nice pieces in this book here. There we are, there's one. So this is actually a really lovely old table, and it had some just nice grain and some old knots and things in it. So that was very rustic. That's quite interesting there. It might be a good point to talk about this, because this is a teak table. That's real teak. And that was really, really, really hard to paint it. I did eventually, although I have to say, oh gosh, how many years on, it's not really stayed that well. It's still there, but it's quite worn away. That's because teak, real teak, is very, very oily wood. There are other woods around called teak, and they're actually not teak at all, and so it works. So that's confused many people. You said you can't paint teak. Well, you can't, not real teak. So there's my lovely floor. So this is from this book, Colour Recipes, which is at my house in France. And this was a new wooden floor, but it had to match the wood next to it, which was an old floor. So what I did was do a wash over them, and I used a great big old sponge and covered the floor. That was quite a job. So 2 big rooms, and I sort of whitewash them really, but allowing the wood to show through. I did a little trick as well. Of course, I didn't sweep the floor before. It was quite cleanish. But that meant that there was little bits of dust in it, but that made it really nice because it dirtied it up a little, because I didn't want that floor to look too clean. I wasn't being lazy at all. So yeah, that's how that was done. So we're going to jump back to the smooth finish, and I'm going to do a final coat on here. So I've done 2 already, but for the bit that I want to do as an ultra smooth finish, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of water, maybe tiny. I'm just going to do a 3rd coat on there because you are sanding it away. You don't want to get through to the wood underneath. But you're using a tiny amount of paint, and none of this is overworking you. Don't over-fuss it. This might be a good point before you paint this to have a tea break, let everything dry, get people talking, because this is a great time for everyone to start talking. Or a coffee break even. So finally, we'll leave all that to dry, and finally this is going on to the 2 colour distress, and I'm going to be using Louis Blue now. So this should be dry. If it's not, you might need to give it a hair dry, depending where you are and what time of year it is. In the summer it will probably dry quicker. So you could use this brush, which will give you a little bit more texture, or this brush, which is quite smooth. Don't apply this 2nd coat thickly, just need to dip in and smooth it on every which way. My paint is always applied every which way, and don't over brush. Make certain that the paint underneath is completely dry, because I've got a little bit there which is wet. So if you do need to, make certain you hair dry it, make certain that is completely dry. And now, while that's still wet with the Louis Blue on, I'm going to do something which is quite a fun thing to do, quite freeing as well. For those who are not used to this, it's quite scary. Just get them to turn a brush around the other way and just draw into it. I'm using a detail brush. I'm using the small one. They've got a nice pointy end, but it's quite soft. And it just allows you to draw in like that. That bit, you'll find that it's not always completely even. Don't worry about that. Just say to people, this is just doodling. And they can do lines, or you could go onto there. So you could find, I'm going to take onto the bit here, which is the wash. I could do a rectangle. Goes through to the colour underneath. What other colour could I use? Oh, I could use a clean brush. A little bit of that. Don't get it too thick, that's a little thick. Well, you can do another one. Whatever you like. It's just play. It's just a nice tool to do. I've got a little sample of something I've done earlier. This is a measuring stick for children. I've done a blue background that goes into green. I've changed the colour a little, sort of slightly ombre, working wet into wet colour, and just done these little marks. It's just such a simple way to do things. So you should have things like this to explain. I mean, I love that one because you've got some Scandinavian pink. I've drawn a little square around it, and then did a blob of Honfleur and a blob of Tilton. There I've just done blobs, nothing. And there's some lines. That's printed. There's Antoinette. So it's a fun way to make easy design, and don't feel that you can't do it. So in case you think that this is just for children, I've done 2 little boxes here. I've just done the tops. And there I've done furl, I've done Aubusson, and I've drawn into it. I used a brush. I also used a little tiny bit of metal that I found, that was that shaped, and did those lines as well, and then actually used my finger to wipe those away. So that can look, I think that's quite grown up and modern looking. I also did this one where I was going for something, I'm not sure what it was, but I quite like it. It's got that sort of slight bark fabric look. So I did it, same colours, didn't like it very much, and just wiped over in Enfleur so that it's got sort of a little bit of texture, and then sanded it. So now it's very smooth. And it has quite an interesting look. I mean, the whole box could be done it. I just wanted to show you the tops. So I think this is the sort of thing you should have around. Boxes are fantastic to show off techniques. They don't take up a lot of space. And this is to inspire. What you're there for in your shops is inspire people to do lots of things. And especially if you don't think you're very creative or talented as a painter. But this is not needing that. It needs a bit of an eye, I would say. But it just needs to inspire people. So before I did all that, I did these. So this is my drawing pad. I did some furl. I tried it with Napoleonic, didn't think it looked so good. Tried that, and that's basically what that ended up like, but not exactly. Experimented with different things, and that's where I came up with the brown and quite like that. It was just the colours I happened to have out, but it sort of worked. So don't think that I just start doing it. Painters don't just paint, they experiment and they look and they find and you should be having this sort of thing all the time. So don't feel it's got to be done first off. So this technique is called sgraffito. I also sometimes might refer to it as incising, because you're drawing in. This is a very, very old technique. It was used on the old, the blackened terracotta Greek vases. That's what that technique is. It was an orangey terracotta background. They put a black slip over it, and then they would draw into it. So this isn't something I've made up. I've just used something that I found from years back that artists have always used. So don't think that this is some crazy funny thing that Annie's made up. No, it's something that comes from real proper art history and real proper art as well. All these ideas are to show that this paint is not just for the one-trick pony. It's not just one coat of paint. You can have texture, you can have sgraffito, you can have fun with designing. There's so many different ways to do it. So every customer is going to go, I want that, or, oh, I never thought I liked that, but wow, that looks interesting. So samples around the room, samples around your shop for people to get inspired by. So we are going to do this here. So this is the sanding pads, introduce them. These are fantastic sellers. They can be used again and again in many different ways. So they come, 3 of them. There's this one, which is medium, the pink one is fine, and the blue one is coarse. I would start off, actually, if there's quite a lot of brush marks, well, there isn't, but I usually start off with the green one, which is the medium one. And I'm just doing this little bit here. And it's not hard work. I'm really being quite gentle. I just want to get rid of maybe any large amounts of brush marks that you've got. If you're doing it too hard, what you're going to end up with is dust everywhere. And also you might go down too deep. So I've just got rid of everything. It feels really smooth already. But now the pièce de résistance is this. This is the fine one, and it's really beautiful. And again, very gently. And you'll notice the difference already. And if you feel that, it's just beautiful, silky, silky soft. This is a smooth finish like no other smooth finish. This isn't just a painted smooth finish. This is superior. It's just beautiful. So leave it at that point. This is a normal smooth finish, and that's going to be fine. What I'm going to do now is start waxing. So I'm going to introduce you to the waxes. This is the clear wax. It looks white, but it's in fact completely clear. This is what I often call brown wax, but it's in fact dark wax. That's the name we call it. It is a brown, as opposed to this, which is black. And then I finally have this one, which is my white wax. So there are my waxes. The first thing you need to do is you're going to put those away, because what we need is the clear wax. You need to use these brushes. All your customers should be using this. If they don't, they never get a chance to use it. And to understand why these brushes are amazing. This is an old one and a new one. So that's the old one, and it's worn away slightly. That's completely normal. This is bristle. It's natural. It does wear. And that is a relatively new one, so it's still quite pointy. They last for a long time. The reason you might wear them out very quickly, some people find that they wear out very quickly, is that they use them to buff. This isn't using it to buff, this is to apply wax. So I've got quite a lot of wax on there. You need to be fairly generous. If you're not generous enough, you find it harder to do it. I hear some people say, oh, I'm finding waxing difficult. You don't want to have a huge amount of wax, but you do need to have a generous amount on there. So I'm going to do this whole area here. This is the one, to remind you, with lots of texture, complete contrast to this. So I'm going to put it all over. You'll notice there where I've sanded it, it was lighter. And there it's made it go back to the normal colour. So I'm going to go everywhere. Now, next bit is, because I've got a smallish area, just want to make certain I don't have too much wax on there. If you're doing it on a piece of furniture, you can carry on, but this is a smallish bit. A very small area, so I find I generally put too much wax on. So I'm removing the excess. You might find you get a little bit of blue on. That's absolutely fine. Don't panic, there's no problem at all. Just tiny bits. The darker is where around the edges, I think. So yeah, that was a bit wet, I think. Let's probably put on thicker. So I'll just turn that around so there's nothing going back on. And I'm going to make certain there's not too much on there. So that should now that's great, that feels dryish. Because what you're doing there is putting paint onto a surface which then has to absorb in. And so that's what's special about this paint. It allows the wax to absorb in and make a new product, really. It's firmly in the paint. It's like blotting paper, it's absorbed it. Now this bit here is where I had it sanded already. And I'm going to wipe that extra bit. That is really beautiful and smooth. It's just unbelievable, really fabulous. Now this bit here, the trouble is, once you see it compared to that, you're going to go, oh no, that's really smooth. And that doesn't feel so smooth, but it is still pretty smooth. If you do think, oh, actually, I could have gone a little bit better, you could just do a little bit on that, not much. You don't need to. None of my techniques are about working really, really hard. So that now is just a little bit smoother, depending what you want. So that one's now finished, and you should all be oohing and ahhing how beautiful they are. And now this bit here, if you remember, needs the different waxes. So this is where some magic happens, because you change this blue into some other looks. At this point, I don't think you should be using these brushes because you'll have so many otherwise. And so I would apply it with cloth or whatever it is you use. We tend to use, these are old sheets, you can buy old sheets from hotels and what have you. I prefer it, but I know some people have used various papers and various things. It's up to you, whatever works for you and is easy for you. So I'll start with white. So this is the white wax, and it is very white compared to the other. Sometimes I will use this directly on the paint. I won't do the clear wax on it first. I did it all because it's just easier for here. But you can just put it on. It doesn't have the the covering power, I suppose, and it's slightly waxier than the other two. So put it on first, because you need to let it dry on there. Now, when I apply it, I will go every which way. Really, really important. So I'm going up and down, across, diagonally, to making certain it's on everywhere. And now I'm going to leave that, not too long, it's got to be wiped off, but just a little bit to sort of set a little bit. So that's on there. I'm going to put that one to the side. I can turn this round now and use another colour. And I will use the dark wax. So dark wax is a brown colour. It's a slightly yellowy brown, not a reddy brown. Now when you put that on, you'll find that because this is blue, and blue and yellow make green, this will sort of make this background, this colour go slightly green. Not actually green, but there'll be a sort of green tinge to it. And again, I'm doing it every different direction. And then I'll turn that round, get a nice clean bit. And then I'm going to wipe the excess off. Again, never wiping too hard. If you feel you're wiping very hard, your arm's getting sore, you're doing it far too strong. You just need to be soft. So if I was doing it on a real piece of furniture, I'd probably do it in sections. Not sections within the tabletop, as it were, but I would do the whole tabletop and then the sides and then the fronts. And so that's the way. You don't want to be doing sections on the tabletop because they'll dry. So lots of people stop at this point and go, there it is, done. But actually, I'm looking at that and I've found I've missed a few bits. So I've got some bits which are still blue. So I'm going to just work into that again. And you'll find the second time round, it goes in, and you missed bits the first time. So this second time is really important. And then I'm going to wipe the excess off again. And you find it's gone in a different way. So now I'm going to use some clear wax. This step is very important. So I'm now going to go onto there and wipe the excess off, just gently. And this isn't you cleaning the tabletop, it's almost like painting with it. You want to watch what you're doing to make certain that it is just as you want. So you could take quite a lot off and it stays in the grooves but cleans off the top. I think this is magical. I always like this bit. And that's why it's important to make certain that customers, your workshop people, take off quite a lot, because otherwise they go away thinking it's going to stay very dark. And really, it should stay quite light. So that to me is quite a sort of old look. It's sort of warehousey perhaps, rustic, all sorts of looks. Now I'm going to use the black wax. I use another piece of cloth to keep it clean. So here's the black. It does exactly the same. You need to put it on quite generously, going every which way, making certain it goes in. So being black, it's not going to change the blueness, whereas that's slightly greener. Not hugely, just it's made a little difference. So I'm now going to wipe the excess off. Again, being quite delicate. I'm not pressing hard at all. Why you are always delicate? It's because you don't know what this bit is going to reveal, what this piece of furniture will be like. So some pieces are more absorbent than others. It's just different. I've got a lot of texture on mine, so it's showing up a lot. So this does take probably of them all, these two, a bit more effort, but I think it's worth it because I think it's so beautiful. And now clear wax, usual thing, putting wax on and then taking it off again. And it's great fun because you never quite know what you're going to reveal, because every brush mark is slightly different. That's quite interesting too. I've got a knot there. So because of the paint, we've got some beautiful, very absorbent paint and a very textured paint. We've got this lovely look. Of course, you can mix as well. Now at this point, actually, I've just remembered, I better take that off gently. You never know how far. You don't want to just start scrubbing it. If you take too much off, you can always do it again. And you can even do some fancy things where you might try putting a little bit of the white wax on here as well. You may or may not, depending on your group. Some groups that I have when I'm teaching customers, I think actually this lot could take it. They're really, really very arty and get it all. So I might introduce putting some white wax on. But if you feel actually they're all just beginners, don't do that. You keep it at the level that they need. That's a sort of an extra. So there's the black wax, the brown wax and the white wax, and then you leave one just to show, or you could even mix and do some special things there if you want. So how are you doing, Amy? So Amy has done what a lot of customers do. She's put it on and she hasn't taken off really well. And so and if she leaves it too long, then it hardens and then it's really hard to take off. So not great. So could do better, Amy. But that is what people will do. And you need to tell them. It's hard sometimes, but because they're so proud of it and they love it dark. They think it's wonderful. But I think they should know that maybe it does look better when it's not quite so, looks like wax is put on it. And then they see that, and they think, oh, actually that is nice, especially in real life. And we need our customers to go away looking and making beautiful pieces. So there we are, thank you very much. So an amazing technique this. I think it's one that I have the most fun with. I love it that it can look rustic, it can look warehousey, it can just look really modern. All of these techniques depend on how you do them really. What colours you use and the piece of furniture you do. Sky's the limit, really. So finally, we have to go on this one. And I'm just going to use clear wax now. So this should be all dry. So I'm going to do that all over. So I always wax and then I sand. Some people think that I sand before, but I don't. If you do that, you will find you get the ultra smooth finish, which is beautiful, but it does make it quite dusty, and especially for a workshop. You don't want lots of dust. That'll be fine for a small area. Also, if you don't do it, you'll find when you've especially got two colours going on, you might find you've got something going on that you hadn't realised. You sand it and you've then put wax on it, and the wax reveals more than you thought, and it will be a bit of a shock. So you're much better to have control, to sand it after you've waxed it. So I put my clear wax on. I'll get another bit of cloth, wipe the excess off. I'm wiping the excess off because you don't want lots of wax on your sanding pad. So my technique is always paint, wax, sand. That's the mantra, paint, wax, sand. So I will start as usual with the green one. The green one's the medium one. Again, this should not be hard work. If you're finding you're really going for it, you put too much paint on. And where I've got a little bit of texture in there, you're showing up little bits. And I think there was a little bit of wood there somewhere. There we are. There's the other bit. I've gone through to some of the wood grain there. You may or may not want that. It happens more on new wood than it does in old wood. And then you just, I wouldn't do loads and loads of it, unless you want a really rustic look. If you want a rustic look, really go for it. Then take the coarse sandpaper and let's go on here. You could really go for it. It's quite difficult on a small piece of wood like this. On a piece of furniture, it's so much easier. So you should have something in your shop which shows that. But you can show how you can really go for it and really, really get the colour from underneath. You can even go down to the wood underneath. Going to the wood underneath here isn't great because it's actually pine and modern and isn't beautiful. But if it's an old piece, it looks beautiful, really lovely. So if you think that this is only to make shabby looks, old looks, French looks, rustic looks, think again, because if you look on this board here, this board is full of really beautiful techniques, which are the same things we're doing, but the colours are very modern and it just looks like another thing going on altogether. So it can be really modern. And then after that, because I've taken quite a lot of wax off, you can just go over it quickly. Again, it's not huge, just go over, particularly where you've sanded it a lot. And that's it. If you're going for a rustic look, it might be on areas which are like around a door, areas where it gets touched a lot, all of that stuff. Edges, yeah, it's all up to you. So I never think this looks great here, but in real life it looks absolutely fantastic. So that's it, remember? That's what this is all about. And how good does that look? So that's an old piece of wood. And that little bit there and all these little bits, it's all natural. And that's why it's so great. And again there's bits broken. So little bits of wood coming through and little bits of broken. It looks fabulous. So that's the whole board waxed now. And talking of wax, oh, I quite like that there. Actually, some of my paint's a little bit dry. I quite like where it's sanded away, so you get some little bit of texture there. Really nice. Quite often when I paint, I don't have, it mustn't do that idea. You must go with what happens. In that way, you're going to get much more joy. But also, you're going to find some things that you didn't expect. And that's part the magic. So finally, we want to show these. A little bit of bling in the nicest possible way. These are wonderful, wonderful gilding waxes. Warm gold, bright gold, copper, dark silver and bright silver. And we have those to have a little go on here. So you can either do it onto there or so we can brush them on. By brushing on, you've got quite a lot of nice control. So, and you could stencil these if you liked. Get people understanding how you can even mix them. So I can mix my copper and my gold. So I could put a copper at the end there. Come on, copper. So it goes, it's sort of ombre look, merging from one to the other, which is lovely. The silver, so there's it's working one to the other. And there's the silver. I love this, especially with that blue, isn't it gorgeous? So you need to have some samples around. You can have large areas painted, or you can just, be painting little edges like that. Or you can even do, back to my lovely incising, things like that. Yeah, you can draw smaller lines. So it's up to your customer. You can show them and inspire them some great ideas. And if you have a tiny stencil, you could even do that. If you were stenciling, you'd have a small amount of paint and you'd probably stipple it on like that. Let that dry. Remember, it's wax, so it's going to take a little while to dry. Remember that the gilding wax is the final step. You don't want to be waxing after, or clear waxing rather, after this, because this is still wet. It'll take a while. So this is the last bit. So that's it. That's the workshop. I think that's a really, really stunning board for people to take home. They could even use it they could put little hooks on it or something, but it would be fun to use. But that is going to give them everything they need to know: washes, textures, gilding, 2-layered colours, different colour waxes, a little bit of incising. It's everything there for them to go home and have fun. If you need to understand anything, rewind and have a look at the bits that you haven't understood. There are notes for this, and so fantastic for you to follow yourself, but don't give them to your customers. That's for you only. This workshop should take you about an hour and a half, depending on the group, how many you've got, how many coffee breaks you take, but it's more or less an hour and a half. Thank you very much for watching. It's been great fun to be able to really explain to you everything that I do.